Hey everyone, welcome to CoveredCall ETF Investing, your central hub for deep CoveredCall ETF data. And in today's video, of course, we're going to be going inside the CoveredCall ETF tracker, which you can pick on my Patreon and explore the entire spreadsheet for yourself. There's a lot there. But today we're going to be specifically looking at EQCL, the changes to its holdings and the potential changes to its yield coming up. I think this is going to be a big flagship fund for Global X Canada. It may not feel like it right now, but I think with these changes, it has the potential to really explode in popularity in a big way. And I think that's what you'll see from it. So let's discuss those changes right now. EQCL. I am extremely excited to talk about EQCL. Why is that? Now, this is a fund. Let's go down. Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to look at EQCL. That's all we're going to do. EQCL. Okay, so EQCL has been an interesting fund in the income community ever since its inception. People have wanted sort of a global, like a fund with global reach that ticks off a lot of the boxes in the for a lot of income investors, being above 10% yield, truly having a reach in every single country, or at least every geographical region that there is out there. And as of the making of this, EQCL had two it had a developed markets and emerging markets index kind of growth ETFs. They weren't CoveredCall ETFs. Meanwhile, the other funds within EQCL were CoveredCall based. Things like CNCC and USCC and QQCC were CoveredCall based, but the other two funds in there were not. Well, that has now changed. EQCL has now changed in a big way. It now officially has an emerging markets CoveredCall ETF, and now officially has a developed markets CoveredCall ETF inside of it, EMCC and EACC, which you can actually see on the tracker if you filter it with Global X. So those are individual funds you could invest in. You don't have to invest in EQCL if you want exposure to emerging markets and developed markets as well. But in this anyway, we're going to go through EQCL and why this fund is it's been on my watch list for a long time. I've really wanted them to fully make this fund an all CoveredCall encompassing kind of fund. Now, recently, it did raise its distributions and now sits at almost 12%. Now, 40% of this fund, now when we go into July, we'll see most likely a massive increase. This probably gets us, I know that's big time speculation here, but I'm going to go on a limb and say 14% is what it will probably get to with EQCL. So 14%, maybe a little bit on the lower end, like high 13, low 14% range for it. Over the last, year to date, it hasn't been out for a year, but year to date performance, 5.5%. EQCL in my mind, even though with a higher yield, it kind of I'm going to be switching over USCL over into EQCL. Now USCL, they both have leverage. USCL is currently, it just focuses on basically the S&P. It's basically the S&P 500 with 25% leverage. EQCL also has leverage. Now half of this portfolio is basically USCL. So me selling off USCL to get into EQCL, it's basically almost selling off like half my portfolio and just going into EQCL. That's just the makeup of EQCL. That it's basically mostly USCC with a little bit of QQCC. So if you are thinking of making that switch from USCL into EQCL, if you have any doubts about it, just think of it that way. It's EQCL is basically half of USCL. And its performance is, pretty admirable, just price performance wise. It's going to act as more of a stabilizer because it has more regional diversification. it's not gonna, it probably doesn't do as well as maybe, say, USCL if you're going to compare it to that one. But the nice thing about EQCL is that it's not going to be as much of an anchor. It's going to be more of like a buoy in the portfolio. But it still has awesome, great American weighting to it. So anyway, let's go through. Because it hasn't been out for a year, we don't know what its MER is, but because of the leverage, probably over 2%. But here's the management fee. More or less standard, getting close to that 0.65, which is the typical standard. It's going to write calls up to 50% on the portfolio. It'll be more a case of out of the money. Well, it just mimics whatever it's a placeholder name is what EQCL, because it just does whatever its underlying ETFs do. Its AUM is a little bit on the, I would say, on the smaller side, but it is growing, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. 7 straight months of distribution growth with a distribution increase recently. You can see that its first distribution was 19.5 cents. Since inception, it's now moved up to 21 cents. So year to date, well, its lifetime distribution increase, not even out for a year, it's already almost 8%. Okay, so let's move into the AUM for EQCL. Let's see what kind of health are we looking at for this kind of fund. Okay, we gotta clear all that. EQCL. Okay, so its AUM change year to date up 100%. Great to see that. I think, my opinion, EQCL, as I think the community gets more familiar with this fund, as people become more aware that it's going to be, it's now moved to basically everything inside of it is now all CoveredCall ETF related. I think you're going to see this AUM explode. I just I spend a lot of time with this tracker tracking funds, and when you can kind of see a potential trend coming, I don't think I'm not really going on a limb to say that I think that's what's going to happen with EQCL. So where did it start to start the year? It started at 5.5 million, and every month it's just been steadily growing. These are nice increases, even if you're like, yeah, but it's still a small fund. It's great to see 40% increase, 10% increase, 27% increase. Took a bit of a bump between April and May, but then it recovered, and now we're up to 11 million. Yeah, so I think by July, you're going to see not just, the distribution will increase, but AUM is probably going to take a big jump as well. And I think, this is going to be, I'm hoping that this becomes more of like a flagship fund for Global X Canada. As I said, I'll be switching USCL into EQCL just to get more of that regional diversification. It'll be kind of more built like BMAX, but with more yield, and you get, I would say, more specific index coverage. So with BMAX, it's a little harder to tell. Okay, am I more invested in the S&P 500 than the NASDAQ, or it's a little bit trickier that way. But with EQCL, very simple. When you go to its holdings page, you can easily see what that breakdown is. I know I'm invested, whatever it is, like 40% in the S&P 500, 12% in QQ and in the NASDAQ 100, 24% in the TSX 60. I think emerging markets is like 36%. Emerging markets 12%, and developed markets something like 36% or 35%, some 32%. I'm going off of memory on this one, but that's basically what it is. Okay, so we've looked at that, so we can see healthy fund. Despite its small size, I do think it's going to be due for a breakout here in the next over the next month and a bit. Let's actually check it out when it comes to its liquidity. EQCL, what are we dealing with when it comes to liquidity? Look at that. Green across the board. it's again, this is a fund I feel like people really want to invest in, but it's been that developed markets, emerging markets component that it's like, okay, well, those aren't CoveredCall, though those are some kind of other weird thing called Rolodex. I don't even, anyway, if you go down that rabbit hole, it's a little convoluted, and anyway, they just needed to simplify it and make everything inside of it CoveredCall related. But it's trading volume, steadily going up every single month. Again, a little bit smaller between May and June, most likely going to pick up in a big way between June and July. Trading volume up 113%. So, switching over for USCL, which it's underlying USCC, is a big fund. And let's also not forget that fact as well, is that although EQCL might be a smaller fund right now, it's underlying our big fund. CNCC is a big fund. USCC is a big fund. QQCC is a big fund. The only smaller funds are those developed and emerging markets funds, which are brand new, that just got launched on May 29th. Okay, so that's it for that. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to be switching over to USCL, I'll be switching USCL to EQCC. Looking forward to that. I actually just, as of the making of this video, I just sold off USCL on the last trading day of May, and as soon as the market opens up on Monday, I'll be getting into EQCL. Hopefully you all like that little snippet from the CoveredCall ETF ALLSTAR tracker talking about EQCL. There is a 2.5 hour video on my Patreon that's going to go through all the content I'm going to be releasing in June, so you can watch that all ahead of time if you really want to binge watch everything that I'll potentially be releasing. So there'll be videos over there regarding the delisting of a fund, yield max versus defiance ETFs, which one is better to have. We're going to look at bond ETFs here in Canada, or exposure to bond ETFs. We'll look at BMO funds. So especially with BMO funds, I don't even normally talk about BMO, so we're gonna do that, and all through the CoveredCall ETF ALLSTAR tracker. So if you're interested in the tracker, head over to the Patreon. It should be in the first comment you see below or in the description below. And if you like what you saw, as always, hit all the buttons of the like and subscribe variety, and I'll see you all in the next video.